Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a stupendous show for you today. Briahna, what do we have?
Well, we'll have a panel discussion over California's recall of San Francisco's district attorney. Plus, Richard Hania joins us to discuss masking requirements, and Evan Greer digs into some of the antitrust legislation lawmakers are racing to pass.
But first, yesterday we learned that a 26-year-old man took a taxi to Justice Brett Kavanaugh's Maryland home, where he was arrested in the early morning for threatening to kill Kavanaugh and was taken into custody. There's a lot of details to go over, so here's what we know. Nicholas John Roski, that's the suspect, told police he was angry over the leaked opinion on Roe v. Wade and also the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. The DOJ report states that he got out of his car at 1:05 a.m., I think it was a taxi cab, where he then saw U.S. Marshals and then turned to walk down the street shortly after the Montgomery County Emergency Comm Center fielded a call he made where he expressed suicidal thoughts and had a firearm in his suitcase. He said he came from California specifically to kill Kavanaugh.
An inventory search found a Glock 17 pistol, 2 magazines and ammunition, pepper spray, zip ties, a hammer, screwdriver, nail punch crowbar, pistol light, hiking boots with padding on the outside soles, and other items, according to the FBI. Though it's unclear how he obtained these weapons, if he traveled across the country. Roski told police he was thinking about how to give his life purpose, and he decided he would kill Kavanaugh after finding the justice's address online. Pro-abortion group Ruth Sent Us, who had posted a map on their website showing the apparent addresses of the 6 conservative justices on the bench following the leaked opinion, scoffed at the news, saying, "We are committed to nonviolence," adding, "Oh, what was this weapon the California man had? If it was a gun or even a knife, police would say so."
Well, it was clearly a gun, so.
Yeah, and the police have said so. Do you think a lot of public figures have addresses online and groups post them with the goal of protesting them? Certainly, many anti-abortion rights groups post the locations of abortion centers, and the right for people to protest in front of those centers has been protected for a long time now. Is it fair to put the onus for this person's attempted murder on groups like this abortion group that might have posted the address?
No, I don't think so. Absolutely not. People are responsible for their own individual decisions. This is no one's fault but this person. And that is the standard I would apply in all of these cases. But, look, the issue is that when this happens because of conservative rhetoric, we get a whole national freak out about sometimes free speech itself is impugned. The Sarah Palin, Jared Lee Loughner thing, the Tucson shooting, that kind of thing seems to happen every time there's some indirect or maybe somewhat direct connection to angry conservative rhetoric. And I don't know that association is made as much when it goes the other way, like at the baseball shooting, which was, again, clearly done by a left-wing person. But look, these are all unhinged people. So this is an unhinged person thinking about committing suicide and then connects it to a kind of political ideology. And this is why I actually urge us not to get too obsessed with political ideology when we're looking for it as sources of violence, because there are crazy people who self-harm or harm others, and it very infrequently can you actually really connect it to some kind of political ideology.
And yet, in the Buffalo shooter case, he was very specific about his ideology.
This guy's being specific too.
He said he was going to go kill black people. He wrote, "Here's your reparations" on his gun. He specifically Googled a neighborhood where there were large amounts of black people and drove far out of his way and away from his own community to find them and kill them. And so I do think that there are times when it's not accurate to point to a specific ideology, and there are times where it is, and it is frustrating, I think, to some folks that even in an example like Buffalo, where someone was so explicitly white supremacist, self-described as a white supremacist, there is this hesitation to describe him as such. But back to your earlier point, I'm curious whether you think there's any difference at all, or if there's a gradient at all in terms of responsibility when folks do things like not just post an address, but say put a target on Gabrielle Giffords' head. That was one of the accusations.
I don't think
it
wasn't a target on her. No, it was not a target on her head. It was a target over her district. It was not a target over her face.
Okay.
It was just over her district. using very, you can think whatever you think about it, but common kind of political parlance for, getting people out of, taking them out, putting target signs on things. And by the way, there is no evidence, and this has now been litigated, right? The New York Times got sued over it, but there's no reason to think Loeffner, the shooter in the Gabrielle Giffords incident, saw that map or was inspired by it or was even really particularly conservative. He was a lunatic with some really weird beliefs. He seemed to almost have a more personal grudge against her. It was not, but how that immediately became a stand-in for kind of right-wing violence was very bizarre and did not fit the case whatsoever.
That's fair enough.
There are closer cases. One of them being the baseball shooting, where the person was very clearly a anti-Trump, far left person. And again, I don't blame far left people for that.
The question I'm asking is, the baseball is not actually a good example because there's not any evidence at anybody points to there that Bernie Sanders or any other leftist said anything that would tell people to go and target, even in vague political terms. Target, he doesn't use that language at all. So I'm asking whether there is a spectrum where you would say that a politician does start to bear some responsibility, even if we haven't seen it so far.
No, people who do bad things are responsible for their own actions, is how I would
Do you think this incident is going to make people, even conservatives, think differently about the danger of guns?
Well, I mean, guns can be dangerous in the wrong hands, right? That's what we're talking about. What are the right policies to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them? So we need to learn, how he got this gun or what the situation is there. Again, he's not an 18-year-old, he's a 26-year-old.
Yeah, some people have pointed out that it is historically true that when people on the left, and particularly when black people have demonstrated their open carry rights, that's when we got some of the strictest gun laws in the country. So California has some of the strictest gun laws because of Black Panthers choosing to exercise their Second Amendment right to open carry on the federal steps back in the 1960s, and consequently, almost immediately, we got the kind of gun reform that the leftists have been fighting for years. So I'm curious.
But I oppose all that. I don't want to disarm the Black Panthers. Just like anybody else, they should be able to lawfully carry.
Well, I'm curious to see whether guns employed in this way, but increasingly by people who don't share the political ideology, the people who have historically been the most vocal defenders of the Second Amendment rights, will change the dynamic of the conversation at all.
Well, in light of Kavanaugh's this potential attempt to take his life, Senator Mitch McConnell has called on Congress to pass legislation that protects the justices. Let's watch.
This is exactly why the Senate passed legislation very shortly after the leak to enhance the police protection for justices and their families. This is common sense, non-controversial legislation that passed in this chamber unanimously. But House Democrats have spent weeks blocking the measure that passed here unanimously related to security for Supreme Court justices. The House's Democrats have refused to take it up. Now, look, Mr. President, that needs to change, and it needs to change right now. Right now. House Democrats must pass this bill, and they need to do it today. No more fiddling around with this. They need to pass it today.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear. I don't know what the appropriate level of security is for a Supreme Court justice's house, but it very well could be the case that they need more security than they have. I mean, you should be able to protest in the neighborhood somewhere nearby, of course, but they do need security. I mean, really, if you think about it, and it's dark to think about it, but we could have seen more. Could have seen more attacks on Supreme Court justices live. We could in the future, given the structure of our government. This is by far those specific individuals. Those 9 individuals are the most. I mean, if you're a deranged gunman and want to significantly impact the trajectory of the country or its policies, you would target a Supreme Court justice because the president is just replaced by the vice president. Most of the congressmen would be reappointed by, or the next person would be appointed by a member of the political party. The Supreme Court justices who serve for life and make a lot of policy, and it's getting less and less evenly split, but it's pretty evenly split some of the time. if you're being tactical about this, that is a very high point of influence if you were to kill a Supreme Court justice. So that's something we need to look out for.
Regrettably, judges do get attacked in these kinds of
I know they do,
all the time. And, there are, ramped up sentencing guidelines so that it's a higher penalty for killing a federal judge than other people. In the same way, there's hate crime legislation to try to protect and dissuade people who from attacking groups that have a target on their back for other reasons, because they're historically marginalized.
But the Supreme Court has these lifetime...
But I would argue that actually federal judges and judges that take on more criminal cases are more often the target, because they are the ones that
they're targeted by
mafia and the kinds of trial work that they do, and they do have protections. Now, again, there's a question about whether or not the Supreme Court has sufficient protection. The fact that this man was caught and wasn't able to do harm, it doesn't seem to have come especially close to doing Justice Kavanaugh any harm, suggests that the measures that are in place are adequate, although that's for experts to decide. And I certainly don't have any ideological opposition to the idea of people getting the protection they need. Now, certain other people, when we were having these conversations about government funding to bolster protection or support to other kinds of people in need and vulnerability, would say, okay, it's on you. If you feel like you need additional protection above and beyond, you should use your personal money, you should use your personal resources. We're going to do a libertarianism, and we're going to ask people to lean on their own resources to hire more staff and more guard and more protection if they want. Certainly any number of very famous people have close protection. I don't know if you watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but they often make reference to the cost of having to fly their people back and forth on a private jet.
Okay, the Kardashians can pay for their own protection. I don't... I guess we've reached the limits of my libertarianism. I am fine having some publicly funded defense for the 9 most important people in the country, government employees in the country.
And there is, but that's not the question. The question is whether or not it should go above and beyond what has been historically precedented, and which was successfully able to stop this man last night.
I mean, the Supreme Court is more important than it's ever. Their relative influence and power of those 9 people has increased over time as the Supreme Court takes on a greater legislative function, being it is the only branch of our government that can function in the climate, which I know what you don't like.
The activist Supreme Court has been taking over a greater legislative function, and that's something that we should continue to talk about on the show, and whether that is
sure. But I'm saying that might make them more attractive targets than they would have been previously, is what I'm saying. Glenn Greenwald has taken aim at the media's coverage of the incident, saying the FBI was clear that Brett Kavanaugh his would-be murderer was acting to advance liberal dogma about Roe and gun control. So, of course, it's getting little attention. Over on CNN, they tried to deny the man had a weapon at all.
Very little detail at this point, Kate, other than to say this man he's an adult man from California. We don't yet know what the nature of the threat was. We don't know what language the threat was or what kind of weapon this man might have had, if he had one at all, because the information at this point is just so thin. But Kate, this certainly contributes to this overall threat landscape we've been talking a lot about. The major concern here with this abortion ruling from federal officials, and they've been sounding the alarm on this for about a month, is that Supreme Court justices will certainly be, potentially targeted by violent extremists who are angered over this pending ruling that is poised to strike down Roe v. Wade. This is an extremely passionate issue. There are emotions on both sides.
Well, Supreme Court police funding is included in the salaries and expenses total for the Supreme Court. In 2022, $98.3 million were allocated for the salaries and expenses account. $107.2 million has been requested for 2023. I am hopeful that amount of money is able to.
Look, I'm not saying you're wrong. Maybe what they're spending right now is perfectly sufficient. You're right. He didn't come close. It's great. That's fine. That could be the case. I'm not saying it's the most important issue. More funding,
physical harm to befall Kavanaugh or any of the other justices. Whether or not CNN and the other liberal media have been downplaying this, it's not clear to me, even from that clip, because as we saw in the Uvalde coverage, day one, we were not privy to any of the information, a small fraction of the information that we ultimately became privy to. So I don't know to what extent people are just waiting for the drips and drabs to come out. Look, we have a bifurcated media sphere. where people emphasize the things that they think are most important.
Right.
I saw little to no coverage of the fact that the Supreme Court held yesterday that Border Patrol agents can violate your Fourth Amendment rights and you have no recourse. Is what we'll be talking about in my radar a little bit later. And it's not surprising to me that liberal channels might emphasize other news stories, whether it's unionizing Starbucks workers, whether it's concern about pocketbook issues with people facing inflation and an inability to feed themselves. There's a lot of news in the world, fortunately or unfortunately, much of it bad, and people are going to prioritize things differently.
I did want to, and we got to go. I did want to quickly, though, play that Chuck Schumer clip we have because I wanted to make a point about it. Can we roll that?
And they're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
Right, so there was a lot of blame coming from the right at saying that that's the kind of rhetoric sicking this person against.
He's a regular joker.
Again, I think that's ridiculous. That is not, if some insane person responding to that or whatever goes and does something violent or crazy, that is not Chuck Schumer's fault. This is the casual associations with speech and violence that people are making all the time that I utterly, totally reject. That is normal political rhetoric. It is not at all responsible for what happened. It is insane to pretend otherwise, and the right should call out the left when they make those kinds of associations, rather than the first time there's even a slight opportunity for them to do so, give in to the temptation to do the very thing they have decried when the other side does it. So,
yeah. Well,
I look forward to hearing what's on your radar coming up next.